This is a Red FM Vancouver podcast. Make sure you hit subscribe for more great content. For further info, log on to redfm.ca.
ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਅੱਜ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ Honourable Marco Mendicino ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਨਗੇ। Marco Mendicino, Minister of Immigration, ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਖਾਸ ਤੌਰ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ COVID-19 ਦਾ ਕੀ ਇਫੈਕਟ ਪਿਆ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਅਤੇ ਹੋਰ ਇਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਸੰਬੰਧਿਤ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਹੋਣਗੀਆਂ। ਉਹ ਆਟਵਾ ਤੋਂ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਟੈਲੀਫੋਨ ਲਾਈਨ ਤੇ ਹਨ। Minister, good morning.
Good morning, Harjinder. Sat Sri Akal, sir.
Sat Sri Akal, thank you very much. Minister, can you tell us how much effect this COVID-19 has on immigration system as a whole?
Well, first, I'm happy to be on your show, and I do want to say that I really enjoyed my first appearance back. It seems like a while ago now, but since then, the government has responded very effectively on COVID, and we're now starting to see the real benefits of our approach, whether it's with regards to public health care controls, through isolation and physical distancing, all of the emergency relief that we have introduced for people who have lost their work or who have reduced employment, for families and for businesses and for the charitable sector. We have introduced the money that is necessary, the resources that is necessary to help people keep people's heads above the water through this period. And my department has really worked on a number of important priorities at Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada. We've helped with the historic effort to repatriate Canadians and permanent residents who are abroad and bringing them back home to be with their families. And we have also ensured that essential workers, people who work in particular in the seasonal agricultural sector and in the seafood sector, are coming into the country. They are submitting to the 14-day mandatory isolation period, but then they are getting to work on those farms, planting and seeding so that we can maintain our food supply chain in the long run. And this is one of the most critical essential services that are there. We've also made some changes to the international student program to allow those students who are here acquiring a degree in one of the essential services, for example, in medicine or in nursing or in personal support care work. We are looking at ways to introduce additional flexibility so that those students can lend a helping hand to the front lines of our healthcare system, our long-term retirement homes. And together, when you look at all of these measures, we are taking an all-hands-on-deck approach. We are going to make sure that we are leveraging all of the skills and experience and labor that is within our means to respond to COVID-19. And the message that I want to send to all of your listeners is that the Government of Canada is there for you. We have your back, and we will continue to.
Minister, did you say that you're bringing home back all those stranded Canadian citizens and PRs? Are PRs also being brought back, or just the citizens?
That's correct, Harjinder. No, one of the realities is that we know that there are many families that are made up of both citizens and permanent residents, and we want to be sure that we are keeping families together. So for families who traveled abroad, we have ensured that the travel restrictions which are in place do provide exemptions for not only citizens but permanent residents as well. And as I say, that work is continuing, and the repatriation effort which has been led by Global Affairs Canada, but with incredible support from the Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship Department through consular support, has led to over 21,000 Canadians coming home on over 167 flights. And I know in particular for your listeners, there are many flights that are coming back from India, and that work is continuing. Over, I think, still 17 or 18 flights we plan to have come back in the future. And again, this is a big part of the way in which we have shifted our priorities to be sure that we're getting Canadians and PRs home, as well as protecting the health and safety of Canadians who are here at home in Canada.
So would you bring back immigrants or permanent residents who are not accompanied by the Canadian citizen?
Yes. So there are permanent residents, and they are captured under one of the exempted classes under the current international air travel restrictions. which means that if they have their valid paperwork, then they are going to be allowed to re-enter Canada, subject to a number of important caveats. First, they have to be asymptomatic, which means that before they board the flight, they have to be healthy and in good shape. Secondly, once they are back in Canada, they have to submit to the mandatory 14-day isolation period, which has been introduced under the Quarantine Act. This is something that applies not only to permanent residents, but to all Canadians, and indeed to everybody who is coming into Canada. And it's there to ensure that we are preventing the spread of COVID-19. And as a result of these measures, we are starting to see that the curve is starting to flatten, is starting to move in a downwards trend, and that is very encouraging. And I think it really demonstrates that Canada has taken the measures that are necessary to combat COVID-19, and we will continue to revisit those measures in the future. But for now, they're working, and that should be a source of some assurance to your listeners.
And also, Minister, a lot of people have sponsored their parents, and some people on work permit also, and they have forced, or they have been applying for some people have to apply for CERB. Would it affect their application process or no?
Well, I'm pleased to report that it won't. So if you are sponsoring somebody to come to Canada, whether it's a spouse or a child or a parent, and you have lost your job or your wage has been substantially reduced such that you're earning much, much less than you would before COVID, then claiming the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, or what we're calling CERB for short, will not in any way be deemed to be social assistance and negatively impact the sponsored application. And that's something that I know was very much a source of some concern and some anxiety. But again, here, my department, in conjunction with ESTC, has ensured that there will not be any negative repercussions as a result of claiming CERB, because we recognize these are truly unprecedented and exceptional circumstances, and we really do have to be sensitive to that.
Because some people on LMIA holders, they are hesitant to apply for CERB because lost their wages, but they're thinking it might impact their PR application.
Well, yes, and as I just said, we want to be sure that is not the case, and certainly we have introduced the policies, the interim and special policies, which are consistent with the exceptional circumstances that we find ourselves in, so that if you are sponsoring somebody and you have lost your job, or you are just not able to make anything close to what you were making before, that claiming CERB will not negatively impact your ability to sponsor, as I say, a parent, a spouse, or a child going forward. And my department is working through those individual cases, but I will tell you that by and large, CERB is working. The Canada Emergency Response Benefit has literally provided support, critical support, for millions of Canadians. These are Canadians who are hardworking, who have contributed, who have lost their jobs because of COVID. We hope temporarily, but it's not the only thing we're doing. We've also introduced an emergency wage subsidy so that as many employers as possible can keep that relationship with their workers throughout this period. And the emergency wage subsidy provides up to 75% of your normal wage with some caps in place, but still, the point is that we want to take all of these measures and position Canada to reopen the economy as soon as we are in a position to do so. And that's the way in which we are going to get those people back to work, especially in the essential services sectors like healthcare, like food security, like ensuring that we have the energy and the ability to transport our goods and services. And I think that when you look at all of these things, Harjinder, we've taken a very, very aggressive strategy to fight COVID-19, keep Canadians healthy and safe, and position ourselves for a rebound.
And Minister, a lot of people are stranded outside the country. When they're going to apply for the citizenship, what would happen to the time they have lost living outside of Canada? Would it be counted towards their time in Canada, or they will lose that time?
Well, looking for the answer to that question, I will say that we are examining as many options as possible so that we can minimize the impact of COVID-19 on all immigration processes. So as I mentioned before, claiming cert will not have a negative impact. And I know for a number of other individuals, we're still reflecting and reviewing how it is that we can minimize the disruption that COVID-19 has caused.
So this time lost would not be really impacting their application to apply for citizenship then?
We are very much reflecting and reviewing all of those processes, and certainly to the extent that we can, we will minimize the impact of COVID-19, because it's important that we recognize that immigration has long been a pillar of this country, and it will be absolutely vital and essential to our recovery after we're on the other side of this curve.
Minister, another thing that's bothering people is that people who have tested positive in the past in other countries, would they be deemed inadmissible if they wanted to come visit Canada or wanted to immigrate here because they have tested positive for coronavirus once?
Well, as I mentioned, Harjinder, the first and most important screen is that you have to be healthy before you board your flight. So if you are presenting any symptoms or if you are in any way posing a health risk long before COVID, and certainly now, especially during COVID, you would not be even allowed to board that flight. If you are not symptomatic and if you otherwise have a clean bill of health, then you are able to board the flight. And our colleagues at Transport Canada and our partners who are running the international airlines into Canada are responsible or sharing that responsibility. And then once you are back in Canada, Harjinder, it is absolutely imperative that everyone submits to the 14-day mandatory isolation period. And my department has introduced, along with Health Canada, a number of provisions under both the Quarantine Act, the Aeronautics Act, as well as the Immigration Refugee Protection Act, to ensure that those rules are in place. This is to guarantee the health and safety of all Canadians and all who are within Canada. So I cannot underscore how important it is that we have these screens in place. This is the only way we're going to prevent the transmission and the spread of COVID-19. And as we learn more about this virus, where it is likely to cause outbreaks, then we will be able to increase our testing, learn more about how we can minimize the spread of this disease going forward. And I think together, these measures are working very effectively.
And also, Minister, some visitors are stuck in Canada. They were here visiting, now their visas are expired. Would they face any kind of repercussions?
I'm sorry, could you just repeat that last question? You got cut off a bit.
There are lots of visitors. They were visiting Canada from other countries and their visas have been expired. Would they face any kind of consequences or any kind of repercussions?
So if you are here and you have a valid visa and it's expiring, my department has the broad discretion that is necessary to ensure that we are extending where we can, and as long as it is for valid purposes. In particular, I'm thinking about those who are here for temporary foreign work, as I mentioned earlier, the Seasonal Agricultural Work Program, as well as international students. But equally, if you are here and you're visiting and you can't get back home because there are no flights or because there are other impediments and barriers to you traveling back home, we are looking at ways to ensure that those visas are extended. And in fact, there's a very simple and straightforward process by which you can log on to our website and extend those visas. And again, this is all subject to all of the public health care controls which are in place. We expect everyone who is here in Canada, whether you're a permanent resident, whether you're a visitor, to abide by the rules, the protocols which have been put in place, backed by the evidence and the advice of our public health care experts. And because of those measures, we are starting to see the curve move in a downward trend. That is a reason for cautious optimism, but we have to continue to follow those protocols if we want to be sure that we don't see another surge or another outbreak. And I'm very confident of the work that our government has done in conjunction with our provincial and municipal partners right across the country. It's one of the reasons why Canada, I think, is faring very well relative to the performance of some other countries.
Minister, since colleges and universities are closed and virtual learning only, would it impact the number of students coming to Canada, international students, in the near future?
Well, that's a very good question, Harjinder. And certainly, as I said, we have looked at ways that modifying the international student program to create some flexibility where it can help in the short-term response to COVID-19. As I mentioned, we've looked at ways to loosen up the work permits for international students in a way that's responsible. And the way that we have taken this approach is by looking at the international students program through the lens of essential services and healthcare and in other areas where they can lend a helping hand. I think the other thing that we have done, which has again been met with a lot of positive responses, looked at online education. So if you are here and you have an international student visa, you could take up to 50% of your courses online for the spring semester without any penalty or negative repercussion working after you graduate. If you are abroad and you signed up for the spring semester, you can take fully up to 100% of your courses online without in any way compromising your ability to come and acquire the Canadian experience in the labor workforce once you get here. But I also want to point out, Harjinder, as you allude to, that there are other impediments to participating in this program, not least of which are the travel restrictions which are in place, the fact that there are fewer flights, to get from the place that you live into Canada. So we're going to work with our provincial partners. We're going to work with the post-secondary sector to really collaborate and brainstorm ways in which we can continue to see the international student program be a contributing success, because we know this program pumps into over $21 billion into the economy every year. That's very significant, and that's not going to be just good for international students and universities. It's going to be good for everyone in Canada, all Canadians, our Canadian economy, and as I say, this is one of the reasons why immigration will be part of the economic recovery, which we're positioning ourselves for very, very aggressively.
Minister Mendicino, anything in closing?
Just to say that I really appreciate to come on your show, Harjinder. It's always good to speak with you, my friend.
Thank you.
I just want to say hello to all of your listeners and to the community, and I look forward to coming back and visiting in person as soon as I possibly can. In the meantime, take care of yourself and your family.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Canada the Immigration Minister Honourable Marco Mendicino ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਸਨ.
Thank you for listening to another Red FM podcast. Don't forget to hit subscribe and check out our Red FM Canada YouTube channel. For further info, log on to our Red FM social media platforms or visit redfm.ca.